The sound of footsteps approaching from the other side of the clearing made her heart skip a beat. There were more. Other creatures, each more deadly than the last. Lyra's mind raced, searching for a way out. She couldn't fight them all, not with her weapon malfunctioning, and no backup from her people. She was alone on a strange planet, and every moment here was a danger she wasn't prepared for. Lyra glanced back toward the horizon. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the land. There was no time to think, no time to analyze her situation. She had to move now. She darted from the rocks, using every ounce of her speed to cover the ground. Her energy blade flickered to life, its weak glow offering a bit of protection against the darkness. But it wasn't enough. The creatures would catch up soon, and she had no idea where to run. Every step seemed to lead her deeper into the wilderness. Her mind flashed to her mission. She had come here to study Earth, to learn from its creatures, but she was no longer sure what she would learn. This planet wasn't just a place of primitive animals. It was a place where survival was the only law. And Lyra was learning that the hard way. The Deathworld of Earth wasn't just a name. It was a living, breathing reality that could end her life in a heartbeat. With a rush of adrenaline, she pushed herself harder, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she ran. Behind her, the sounds of the creatures grew louder, their growls echoing in the night air. Lyra's mind raced as she desperately searched for a way to escape. She could no longer ignore the truth. Earth was not just another world. It was a place where only the strongest survived. And she was beginning to realize that, despite her skills, she might not be one of them. As she ran, Lyra couldn't help but wonder how long she could last in this world. How long before the creatures of Earth tore her apart, just like they had done to so many before her. Would she even be able to survive the night? Or would Earth, the Deathworld, claim another victim? The thought haunted her as she sprinted through the darkening wilderness, her heart pounding in her chest. Lyra's pulse thundered in her ears as she ran through the dense forest, the weight of her panic growing with each step. She could feel the creatures behind her, their growls and heavy footfalls getting closer, more insistent. The night air grew colder, and the trees, once a shield, now seemed like walls closing in on her. She needed to think, to focus, but fear had a grip on her mind that was difficult to shake. Every instinct screamed at her to keep running, but her logical mind warned her that exhaustion would set in soon, and she would be no match for what was hunting her. The thudding of claws against earth was unmistakable now. Lyra glanced over her shoulder, just in time to see a massive, shadowy figure charging toward her. It was one of the creatures from earlier, the one with glowing yellow eyes. Its muscles rippled beneath its thick fur, and its teeth gleamed in the fading light of the day. It was gaining on her, faster than she could have imagined, and Lyra knew she wouldn't be able to outrun it for long. Desperation took hold, and her thoughts raced for a solution. Her hand instinctively went to the small device on her belt, the distress beacon. It had always been her last resort, but at this moment, it seemed like the only option. She fumbled with it, her fingers slick with sweat, trying to activate it. But just as she was about to press the button, her foot snagged on a hidden root, and she went sprawling onto the ground. The impact knocked the breath out of her lungs, and she gasped for air, her vision blurring as she tried to push herself back to her feet. Before she could get up, the creature was upon her. Its heavy breath sounded like a rumble from a storm, and Lyra could feel its hot, rancid breath against her skin. Her heart pounded in her throat as she stared up at the beast, unable to move, unable to breathe. The creature snarled, its claws extended as it leaned closer to her, and in that moment, Lyra's fear reached its peak. This wasn't just an animal. It was an apex predator, something built to hunt, to kill, and to survive. And it had chosen her as its prey. But just as she thought her end had come, a sharp, loud sound rang out from somewhere in the distance. It was a crack, followed by a sudden burst of light, a blinding flash that made Lyra's eyes water. The creature recoiled, its ears flattening as it growled in confusion and pain. Lyra scrambled backward, her mind barely able to process what was happening. Lyra stepped off the transport ship, her boots hitting the dry soil of Earth for the first time. The planet she had read about in countless reports seemed ordinary. Nothing about it screamed danger or mystery. She had been sent here as part of a peace mission, to study the strange, violent creatures that lived here and report back to her people. To her, Earth was just another primitive world. The atmosphere was breathable, the gravity similar to her home world. She assumed it would be easy to navigate. But as her eyes scanned the barren landscape, something felt off. The wind blew through the dry grass with an eerie whistle, as if warning her. The air didn't smell the way it should have. It wasn't foul, but it was thick with an unfamiliar weight. Lyra squinted at the horizon. There were no signs of civilization anywhere. It was just land. Endless stretches of rocky plains and forests that seemed too quiet, too still. She took a cautious step forward, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The creatures she had seen in her initial scans looked primitive, harmless even. The reports had told her about the dangerous predators, but they had sounded like nothing more than exaggerated myths. She had faced far worse back on her home planet. Earth, after all, was just another step in the exploration of the galaxy. Nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. Or so she thought. The sudden rustle of movement to her left broke the silence, and her heart skipped a beat. Lyra's hand instinctively reached for the energy blade strapped to her waist. Her eyes darted around, scanning for any sign of danger. The wind had picked up, and the trees in the distance creaked as if whispering secrets. Her training told her to stay calm, to assess the situation before making a move. But her instincts were screaming. Something was wrong. For a moment, there was nothing but the rustling of leaves. Then, with startling speed, something large and fast darted out of the trees. It was a blur, a shadow that moved too quickly to identify. Lyra barely had time to react before the creature was gone. She exhaled sharply, her mind racing. That was no simple animal. It was something far more dangerous. Her first thought was to activate her communicator, but the screen flickered before she could even touch it. Earth's interference, she realized. The technology here was far different from her own, and it was already starting to malfunction. Her thoughts raced as she took a few more steps forward, the sense of dread growing with each passing moment. There was something watching her. She could feel it, even though she couldn't see it. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as her eyes darted from side to side. Another noise, a low growl this time, much closer. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't just a few creatures. This was an entire ecosystem, one that had evolved to be the apex predator. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled. Her eyes widened as the distant roar of something massive echoed in the distance. It wasn't an animal. This was something far larger. Lyra's breathing quickened as she turned in the direction of the noise, her pulse quickening. She had come here to learn, to observe, but nothing had prepared her for this. The reports had described Earth as dangerous, but they hadn't told her how dangerous. How alive the planet was with creatures that could kill in an instant. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by the sound of something large moving through the brush. Lyra spun around, her hand now fully grasping her energy blade. She wasn't prepared to fight, but she couldn't afford to be caught off guard. She had to keep her distance, observe the creature from a safe place. She moved quickly toward a cluster of rocks, hoping they would offer some cover. Her heart was racing, the fear rising in her chest as she hid behind the outcropping. She could hear the thing moving closer. Its footsteps were heavy, each one shaking the ground beneath her. The sound of its breathing was sharp and quick, like something hunting. Lyra's eyes narrowed as she peered around the rocks. She saw it then, just beyond the trees. It was massive. Its fur dark and matted, its claws long and sharp, as if they were made to tear through flesh. Its eyes were glowing, a bright yellow that pierced the darkness like twin suns. It was a predator, the kind she had only heard about in stories, a creature that could track and kill anything it set its sights on. and right now it had set its sights on her. She held her breath, trying not to make a sound as the creature sniffed the air, its large nostrils flaring. Its gaze passed over the rocks, but it didn't seem to notice her. Lyra knew it wouldn't be long before it would find her, though. The creature was no ordinary animal. It was far more intelligent than she had imagined. It was hunting her, and it wouldn't stop until it had claimed its prey. A second burst of light shot through the trees, illuminating the area with an otherworldly glow. Lyra blinked, trying to understand what was happening. Was it a weapon? A ship? She had no idea, but whatever it was, it had made the creature hesitate. For the first time since she landed on Earth, Lyra felt a flicker of hope. The creature snarled again, this time turning its massive head toward the source of the light. It was momentarily distracted, and that was all Lyra needed. Her breath stilled shallow from the terror of the encounter. She pushed herself up, using the nearby tree as leverage. Her energy blade, still flickering weakly, was in her hand once more, but she wasn't sure if it would be enough to stop the creature. She didn't have time to think about that, though. There was no time for strategy, only escape. Lyra sprinted in the opposite direction, her legs burning with the effort. The strange light behind her flared again, followed by another crack. But she couldn't afford to look back. The creature was still out there, and if she slowed down, it would be the end of her. She darted through the forest, weaving between trees and underbrush. Her breath ragged as she pushed herself harder than ever before. It was then that she realized something terrifying. The light wasn't just a random burst. It was coming closer, closer to her. Whoever, or whatever, was behind it seemed to be following her. And Lyra wasn't sure whether that was a blessing or a curse. She needed to make a choice. Her instincts screamed at her to run further, to find shelter. But she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was coming toward her might be her only chance to survive. She didn't know if it was an ally or another predator, but it was her only hope. Lyra veered sharply to the left, heading toward a small rocky ridge that could offer some shelter. Her breath came in gasps, her legs screaming with exhaustion as she climbed the ridge. She looked back once more, catching a glimpse of the shadowy figure of the creature, still far behind her but closing the distance. The ridge offered a small cave, hidden from view by thick trees and bushes. It wasn't much, but it could give her a moment to breathe, to think, and perhaps regroup. Her heart raced in her chest as she crawled into the shelter, her energy blade still in hand, ready to defend herself if need be. Inside, it was dark and cool, the walls rough against her skin. Lyra leaned against the stone, trying to steady her breathing. She was shaken, terrified, but she had to stay calm. She had survived this long, and she couldn't give up now. But the question lingered in the back of her mind. What had just happened? What was that light? And was it friend or foe? Minutes passed like hours, but it was only then that she realized the silence. The creature was no longer growling, no longer chasing. It was as if it had vanished into the night, leaving her with only the sound of her own heartbeat. The flashes of light had stopped too. Still, Lyra didn't dare relax. Not yet. She had no idea what kind of world Earth really was, and right now, the only thing she could trust was her own survival instinct. She would need more than just a weapon and speed to survive here. She would need to understand this planet, its creatures, and the dangers it held. As she sat in the dark cave, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was just the beginning. Earth wasn't what it seemed, and she hadn't even begun to see the true horror that lay ahead. Lyra sat quietly in the darkness, the sounds of the forest outside her temporary refuge barely reaching her ears. Her body ached from the flight through the forest, and her mind was swirling with the events that had unfolded in the last few hours. The fear was still present, an unshakable weight in her chest. She couldn't afford to let her guard down, not after what she just faced. The creature, the massive predator that had hunted her, was still out there somewhere, waiting for the right moment to strike. But more than that, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The flashes of light had come from somewhere, and Lyra had no idea who or what was responsible. She'd been in contact with her people's scouts on other worlds, but Earth was nothing like any planet she had encountered before. It was wild, unpredictable, and, if the predator was any indication, deadly. The silence in the cave pressed against her like a heavy blanket. Every movement felt exaggerated in the quiet, every breath a loud reminder that she was alone, isolated in a world that seemed to offer no safety. Her mind raced as she tried to come to terms with everything that had happened. The planet she had landed on was supposed to be uninhabited, a place where her research team could study and map the ecosystem. Yet, she had already encountered two things she hadn't expected: a terrifying creature that seemed far too advanced for the planet's classification, and now, the mysterious lights. Whatever was out there, it was clear that Earth was not the simple, quiet world it had been made out to be. Minutes turned into hours, but Lyra didn't dare sleep. The fear still lingered, and the darkness around her felt suffocating. She could hear the occasional rustling outside the cave, but nothing that would give her any indication of what was going on in the forest beyond. It was as if the entire world had fallen into an uneasy stillness. She didn't trust it. Then, a faint sound broke the silence, a crackling of static, followed by a distorted voice. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. It was coming from her communicator. The signal had been weak when she first arrived, but now, it sounded clearer, almost too clear. She scrambled for the device on her wrist, her fingers trembling as she activated the comlink. A garbled image flickered to life on the screen. At first, all she could make out was static, but slowly the image cleared. A figure appeared, a human figure. The figure looked disoriented, its face half covered in shadows, but it was unmistakably human. Lyra. The voice crackled through the comms, sounding strained. Lyra, do you copy? We need tow. The transmission cut out. Silence followed, and Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Who was that? What were they saying? Her hands shook as she tried to reestablish the connection, but the signal was already gone. The voice had been familiar. It had sounded like one of the other explorers from her team, but why was the message so broken? And why was the transmission so delayed? Her mind raced with possibilities. Was she hearing things? Had she imagined the whole thing in her panic? Or was this something more sinister? The creature, the strange lights, and now a broken communication from her team. It all felt wrong. Lyra sat still, waiting for a signal that never came. The cold stone under her was a constant reminder that she was alone, and the unknown stretched out before her. The forest outside had fallen completely still, and the strange noises from earlier had ceased entirely. It was as though the planet itself had gone quiet, waiting, watching. But the silence couldn't last forever. As the hours passed, Lyra felt the nagging feeling that she was not truly alone. She had no idea if the creature was still out there, waiting for an opportunity to strike, but her instincts screamed at her to move. The cold cave, with its looming shadows, felt more like a trap with each passing minute. She needed to leave, but the unknown dangers of the planet made every step forward a gamble. Despite the fear, Lyra knew that staying here was no longer an option. She couldn't survive on this planet by hiding in caves. She needed to find answers, and she needed to find her team, if they were even still alive. With trembling hands, she stood up, the sharp rocks scraping against her skin as she carefully adjusted her energy blade. The cold air of the cave didn't offer any comfort, but she pushed the discomfort aside. Lyra knew one thing for sure: she had to move. Outside, the trees seemed to whisper with the wind, but the air felt still, charged with tension. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching her. As she stepped out of the cave, she immediately crouched low, trying to make as little noise as possible. Her heart was still racing, but her focus was razor sharp. The predator could be anywhere. She moved carefully, making her way through the dense underbrush. Her eyes darted between the shadows, searching for any sign of movement. The forest around her was dark. The trees twisted and gnarled, their branches hanging low like the fingers of an ancient hand. Everything about the place seemed unnatural, but Lyra had no choice but to continue. Hours passed as she made her way through the forest. Her energy blade flickered weakly in her hand, its light barely enough to cut through the darkness. She was beginning to doubt whether she'd find any answers. The forest felt endless, and the more she searched, the more lost she felt. Then, just as she was about to give in to the exhaustion threatening to overtake her, she saw it. A faint flicker of light coming from far ahead. It was weak, almost imperceptible, but it was there. It looked like the same strange light she had seen earlier, the one that had distracted the creature. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. Was this a trap, or was it another sign of hope? Taking a deep breath, she steeled herself. She couldn't let fear stop her now. Every step took her closer to the light, to whatever lay ahead. The forest stretched endlessly, but she had made up her mind. This was her only chance to understand Earth, to survive, and perhaps even to save herself. She moved forward, the light drawing closer with every step. As she neared it, she felt a shift in the air, a strange, electric charge that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Whatever awaited her ahead, Lyra knew one thing for certain. She was about to uncover the true horrors of Earth, and there would be no turning back now. The light ahead grew brighter with every cautious step Lyra took. It wasn't a natural light. It had an artificial feel, cold and sharp, casting an eerie glow that made the surrounding shadows seem even darker. Her heart raced in her chest, but there was no turning back now. She had to find out what was causing the strange lights and why they seemed to be connected to everything that had happened to her so far. Her footsteps were careful, almost silent as she pushed past the dense underbrush. The air around her seemed heavier now, thick with tension. The faint buzzing of something unseen seemed to hum in the background, just beneath the surface of her awareness. It was as if the forest itself was alive, watching her every move. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled, but she forced herself to focus, to move forward. As she reached the edge of a small clearing, she paused, her breath catching in her throat. There, just ahead of her, was a structure she hadn't expected, something metallic and sleek, like nothing she had ever seen before. It stood tall and imposing, partially hidden by the twisted trees, as though it had been waiting for her to stumble upon it. It was a ship, an alien ship, but it wasn't like any ship she had seen in her years of exploration. Its design was strange, otherworldly, and yet there was something oddly familiar about it, something that sent a chill down her spine. Lyra's mind raced. How had this ship come to be here? Was this why the Predator had been so aggressive? Was it somehow connected to whatever force had been manipulating the strange lights? There were too many questions, and not nearly enough answers. She moved forward cautiously, her feet light as she stepped closer to the ship. The metallic surface of the craft glowed softly in the dim light, and she could see symbols etched into its exterior. They weren't like any language she knew. The markings were alien, complex, and intricate, almost as if they had been carved by something far more advanced than the tools she had at her disposal. She reached out a hand, drawn to the ship's surface. The instant her fingers made contact, the ship seemed to hum, vibrating under her touch. Her pulse quickened, and she snatched her hand back, startled. The vibrations were almost like a heartbeat, steady and rhythmic, as though the ship itself was alive. She took a cautious step back, but her curiosity won out, and she couldn't stop herself from looking closer. As she did, something began to change. The ship's markings shifted, glowing brighter, and the strange hum grew louder. The ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble, and Lyra felt a sudden rush of dread. She knew that whatever was happening wasn't just a coincidence. The ship was reacting to her presence, reacting to her touch. Before she could even process the situation, the ship's surface began to ripple, like liquid metal shifting beneath the light. It was a horrifying sight, something she couldn't quite explain, yet it felt familiar in some deep, unsettling way. Her breath caught in her throat, as she realized the ship wasn't just a machine. It was connected to the planet, to Earth itself, in ways that defied logic. Then, as if answering some unspoken question, the ship's door began to open, slowly and silently. Lyra stepped back instinctively, her hand on the energy blade at her side. She knew that whatever came out of that ship would change everything. Her instincts told her to run, but her mind refused to let her. She had to know what was inside. The door opened wider, revealing nothing but darkness within. But then, as though waiting for her to take the next step, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was humanoid in shape, but not human. The figure was tall and lithe, with smooth, pale skin that shimmered in the dim light. Its features were sharp, almost ethereal, with elongated limbs and eyes that seemed to gleam with an unnatural light. Lyra's breath hitched as she took in the being before her, frozen in a mix of fear and fascination. The figure spoke, its voice soft but clear, with an otherworldly resonance. "You are the one who has come." Lyra's mind raced. The voice wasn't like anything she had ever heard before. It was melodic, yet there was an edge of something darker in it, something that sent a chill through her bones. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from me?" The figure tilted its head, studying her with piercing eyes. "We are the Watchers," it replied, its voice almost like a song. "We have waited for you, Lyra of Earth." Her heart skipped a beat. How did it know her name? Was it truly speaking to her, or was this some kind of trick? Fear gnawed at the edges of her thoughts, but she held her ground. This was a turning point, and she couldn't back down now. "I don't understand," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What do you mean by the Watchers? Why are you here?" The figure stepped forward, its movements fluid and graceful, almost hypnotic. "We are the Ancient Ones, Lyra. We have watched over this world for longer than your people could ever imagine. But now, something has changed. The balance is breaking, and Earth's Deathworld is stirring. The predator you encountered is just the beginning. The darkness has come to claim this planet once again." Lyra's pulse quickened. Her thoughts raced as she tried to make sense of the creature's words. The predator wasn't just an isolated incident. Earth's wildlife, the dangers she had encountered, everything felt like it was part of something much larger. A puzzle she had yet to understand. The figure continued, its voice growing darker, more urgent. "You have a choice, Lyra. You can join us, or you can stand in the way of the inevitable. The darkness will consume everything. Earth, your people, all of it. But if you join us, you might have a chance to stop it. Your world can still be saved, but only if you act quickly." The words felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. She had come to Earth to study, to learn, but she never expected any of this. Now, standing before this being, Lyra realized that the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. The figure's eyes glowed brighter, almost as if it could see inside her, reading her every thought. "The choice is yours, but you must decide soon. There is no time left." Lyra's mind spun, the gravity of the situation sinking in. She wasn't just stranded on a strange planet. She was caught in the middle of something far greater than herself. The truth of Earth, of the creatures, of the strange lights. It was all connected. And now, it seemed like the fate of everything hung on her decision. The air around her seemed to hum with anticipation. Whatever was coming next, Lyra knew it was going to be far more terrifying than anything she had encountered so far. The real battle was just beginning. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Lyra's heart raced, her mind struggling to keep up with the flood of questions and emotions crashing through her. The being before her, glowing with an unnatural light, seemed so certain, so confident in its words. It spoke of darkness, of ancient forces, and of a battle for Earth's survival that she had never even imagined. She stepped back, her mind spinning with the implications of what the figure had just told her. She had always believed that Earth's ecosystems, its wilderness, were dangerous and unpredictable, but to learn that there was a deeper, darker force at play, one that threatened not just the creatures but the entire planet, was almost too much to comprehend. "What is this darkness?" Lyra asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "And why should I believe you? How can I trust you?" The figure's eyes glowed brighter, almost as if it were reading her thoughts. There was a moment of silence, heavy and thick with the weight of the unknown. Then it spoke again, its voice calm but filled with a sorrow that Lyra hadn't expected. "The darkness is not just a force, Lyra. It is a corruption. A malignant presence that has been trying to take over this world for centuries. The creatures you call predators are merely its pawns. They are the first sign of its return. If you do not act, if you do not understand the true nature of what is happening here, Earth will be consumed. Not just the wildlife, not just your people, but the entire world. The planet will fall into chaos, and everything you know will be lost." Lyra shuddered at the thought, but the figure's words carried a weight of truth that she couldn't ignore. She looked around the darkened clearing, as if she might somehow find answers in the trees or the air itself, but all she found was a deep, unsettling silence. "Why me?" she asked, the question slipping from her lips before she could stop it. "Why do you want me to join you? What can I do? I'm just a scientist." "I'm not." "You're not just anything," the figure interrupted, its voice firm now, with an edge of urgency. "You are the key. You have the knowledge, the understanding, and the connection to this planet. You're human, Lyra. You have something the darkness does not understand. You are connected to Earth in ways that it cannot fathom. You are the one who can stop it." Lyra's mind raced as she tried to process the figure's words. The darkness was ancient, more powerful than anything she had ever encountered, and yet, somehow, it was afraid of humanity. She felt a strange mix of fear and hope stirring within her. Could she really be the one to stop it? Was it possible for her, a simple human, to wield such power? "I don't even know what to do," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "How can I fight something like this? I'm just one person." The figure stepped closer, its movements so fluid and graceful that it almost seemed to glide. It reached out, placing a cold, long-fingered hand on her shoulder, and in that instant, a rush of information flooded her mind. Images, thoughts, sensations, all crashing together. She saw a vast, dark expanse, a shadow spreading across the land, suffocating everything in its path. She saw creatures twisted and broken, warped by the darkness, until they were barely recognizable. She felt the pain of a world torn apart, and in the center of it all, a single bright light. Humanity, strong and unyielding, standing firm against the overwhelming force. The vision ended as quickly as it had come, leaving Lyra gasping for air, her heart pounding in her chest. She blinked, trying to shake off the lingering effects of the vision. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "That was the truth," the figure said softly. "The darkness you face is not just some alien force. It is a force of nature, ancient and hungry, seeking to consume everything. It feeds on chaos, on fear, on despair. But humanity has something it cannot corrupt: the strength to fight back, the ability to create, to survive against impossible odds. It is that strength that will tip the balance. You, Lyra, are the last hope." Lyra looked at the figure, her mind still reeling from the vision. The weight of its words pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. She had never signed up for any of this. She had come to Earth to study, to learn, and now she was being asked to take part in something far beyond her comprehension. But in the depths of her heart, she knew that there was no other choice. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice firm with a new resolve. The figure regarded her for a long moment, its eyes glowing like twin stars in the darkness. "First," it said, "you must learn what the darkness truly is. You must understand it, feel it, see how it spreads. And then you will fight it, with everything you have." Lyra nodded slowly, her determination hardening like steel. She didn't know how she would stop the darkness, or even what it truly was, but she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't let her world fall without a fight. The figure stepped back, its form blending with the shadows. "Remember," it said, its voice echoing in her mind, "you are not alone in this. There are others who will come, others who are ready to fight. But the path will not be easy, and the darkness will stop at nothing to see you fail." Lyra watched as the figure disappeared into the shadows, the eerie silence returning once more. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of doubt, fear, and hope. She had no idea what she was up against, but she knew one thing. The stakes were higher than anything she had ever faced. Earth was in danger, and she was the one who had to stop it. Taking a deep breath, Lyra turned and walked back toward the forest. There was no time to waste. The battle for Earth had already begun. The following days were a blur of confusion, dread, and overwhelming urgency. Lyra could barely keep up with the magnitude of the task that lay ahead of her. The figure's words echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the threat Earth now faced. But as she tried to process everything, one thing became clear. She was no longer just a scientist studying the world. She was a part of something much larger, something that would shape the future of her planet. In the days after her encounter, Lyra worked tirelessly, trying to decipher every piece of information the figure had shared. She dove into ancient texts, researched old myths, and examined the creatures that roamed Earth's wild places. She needed to understand this darkness, this ancient force that threatened to consume everything. And yet, the more she learned, the less she understood. It was as if the darkness existed outside of human comprehension, an entity that defied every law of nature and physics she knew. But she couldn't afford to stop. Every piece of knowledge could be the key to saving Earth. Then came the day she found the first sign that the darkness was already beginning its spread. It wasn't much, just a single isolated event that at first seemed like a coincidence. A small group of predators had attacked a remote village in the middle of nowhere. But the aftermath was different. The animals hadn't acted in the chaotic, ravenous way they usually did. They were coordinated, purposeful in their attack, as if they were under the command of something far more intelligent. And when Lyra analyzed the remains, the signs of corruption were unmistakable. The creatures had been tainted, altered by something that could warp the very essence of life itself. This was the beginning, Lyra realized. The darkness was no longer just a vague threat. It was real, and it was already here. Desperation set in as Lyra sought to warn the authorities, to get them to believe her before it was too late. But no one would listen. The government dismissed her findings as overblown, sensational, a product of her own imagination. "It's just wildlife behavior," they told her. "There's no reason to panic." But Lyra knew better. What she had seen, what she had felt, was far from normal. In the weeks that followed, the situation only worsened. More reports came in of strange attacks, animals behaving unnaturally, spreading terror across isolated regions. Each time, Lyra felt the grip of fear tightening around her heart. She knew it was only a matter of time before the darkness reached civilization itself. It wasn't until a few days later that the true scope of the invasion became apparent. Lyra had been out in the field, searching for more clues about the strange behavior of the creatures, when she stumbled across something horrifying. A massive herd of once docile herbivores had turned violent, attacking anything in their path. But it wasn't the animals themselves that terrified her. It was the presence that hung over them. There was a dark force pulsing in the air, an oppressive, suffocating energy that seemed to emanate from the creatures, making them behave in ways they never had before. The darkness was no longer just a shadow in the corners of the world. It was alive, and it was spreading. Earth was becoming its playground, its victims slowly falling under its control. But that was not the worst part. As Lyra watched, helpless, a faint sound reached her ears, an unnatural echoing hum that vibrated in her chest. Her heart skipped a beat as she turned to look toward the source of the noise. A ship, a massive ship, hovering just above the ground, its design unlike anything she had ever seen. It was sleek and dark, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. There was no mistaking it. This was not a human vessel. This was the Dark Force's first real weapon, and it had come for Earth. Lyra's blood ran cold. She knew then that this was only the beginning. The true battle was about to begin, and Earth's fight for survival had just entered a new, terrifying phase. Her mind raced as she tried to think of a plan. She could feel the weight of the task ahead of her, the impossible odds stacked against humanity. But one thing was clear: she couldn't fight this alone. The figure had said that others would come, and Lyra hoped beyond hope that it wasn't just a hollow promise. She quickly scrambled to contact those she trusted most: other scientists, fellow experts, anyone who might help. But as she dialed the numbers, she knew deep down that the darkness had already begun its assault, and it wouldn't wait for anyone. She had to act now. The ship's engines hummed louder as it descended closer to the ground. Lyra's heart raced in her chest. The fight for Earth was about to begin, and the only question that remained was whether humanity could survive. With no time to waste, Lyra set off toward the clearing, her mind running through every possible scenario. The darkness had come, and it was up to her to find a way to fight it, to protect everything she held dear. There was no turning back. The horror that had been unleashed on Earth was only just beginning. As the first strike of the Dark Force came closer, Lyra couldn't help but wonder, would humanity be strong enough to resist, or would the darkness claim them all? The night had fallen heavy and quiet over the land. The wind whispered through the trees, but there was an unnatural stillness in the air. Lyra stood alone in the shadow of the massive alien vessel, its dark silhouette looming ominously above the landscape. The soft hum of its engines vibrated through the ground beneath her feet, sending chills up her spine. She had come this far, but now the weight of the truth that Earth was under threat, felt suffocating. She thought back to the warning the figure had given her: "The darkness will stop at nothing to see you fail." Those words haunted her. How could she fight something so vast, so relentless? What could one person possibly do against an entire force that could warp reality itself? But Lyra couldn't afford to hesitate. This ship, this invasion, was only the beginning of the end. If she didn't act now, Earth would be lost. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself as the first true sign of the invasion began to unfold. The ship's massive doors began to open, releasing a wave of cold air and a sudden, eerie silence. From within, a dozen or more alien soldiers began to descend, their bodies sleek and black, moving in perfect synchronization. They stood tall, towering over her, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Their forms were unfamiliar, their movements predatory, and every inch of them radiated menace. Lyra's pulse quickened. Her instinct told her to run, to find cover, to escape. But she couldn't. Not anymore. The figure had said she was the key to stopping all this. She couldn't back down now. As the alien soldiers advanced, Lyra's mind raced. She knew she wasn't equipped to fight them directly. She had no weapons, no tools, just her knowledge. But she did have something they didn't: a deep connection to the Earth. The creatures, the ecosystem. Lyra had spent her life studying it. Maybe she could use that to her advantage. Maybe she could turn the natural world against them. Her eyes scanned the ground around her, searching for anything she could use. The trees, the earth beneath her feet, the animals nearby. She needed to reach deep into what she knew. She didn't have much time. The first alien soldier lunged toward her, its weapon raised high. Without thinking, Lyra dropped to the ground, rolling beneath its grasp. She scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to think fast. The darkness, the invasion, it was all connected. "Come on," she whispered to herself, forcing her mind to focus. A rustle in the trees to her left caught her attention. She didn't have time to react, but a shadow darted past, and before she could comprehend what was happening, the alien soldier that had lunged at her fell to the ground with a thud. Lyra turned, her heart skipping a beat as she saw the source of the attack. A large, dark wolf-like creature, its eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light, stood over the fallen alien. The creature's fur rippled in the breeze, and Lyra could feel an energy radiating from it, something ancient, primal, yet different from anything she had ever encountered. It was as if the earth itself was answering her call. Lyra watched, stunned, as the creature turned and locked eyes with her. There was no fear, no hesitation in its gaze. It was as if it understood the gravity of the situation. Without a moment's delay, the wolf creature turned and attacked the remaining soldiers with incredible speed and ferocity. It tore through their ranks, its movements swift and precise, with a raw power that left the aliens struggling to respond. Lyra stood frozen for a moment, her thoughts racing. The earth had answered, but was it enough? She had no idea where this creature had come from, or why it had appeared now, but she didn't have time to question it. The alien soldiers were regrouping, and the remaining threat loomed large. As the wolf creature fought valiantly against the invaders, Lyra's mind worked frantically. She needed to focus. She had to rally everything she could to stop this. The darkness that had come to Earth was not just alien invaders. It was a corruption, a disease that could destroy everything. The creatures she had studied, the wild places she had once admired for their beauty, were now weapons, altered and twisted by the influence of the darkness. But what was it? What was truly at the heart of this evil? As if in response to her thoughts, the glowing figure from her earlier encounter appeared again, materializing out of the shadows. It was as if it had been watching, waiting. It gave Lyra a silent nod, acknowledging her resolve, before its voice echoed in her mind. "You have made the first step, Lyra. The earth responds because you have awakened it, but you must be ready. The darkness is only beginning to reveal itself. There is more at play here than you can imagine." The wolf creature, having taken down another soldier, bounded over to Lyra, its eyes never leaving hers. She could feel an unspoken understanding between them. The earth was on her side, but that wasn't enough. The alien invaders were relentless, and they were not alone. "You must find the heart of the darkness," the figure continued. "The corruption that controls the invaders, that spreads chaos across the world. It is only through destroying it that you can hope to stop this invasion." Lyra's mind reeled. "Where do I find it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The darkness is a force, not a place," the figure replied. "But you will know it when you face it. The heart of the invasion is not a thing, but a consciousness, an entity that controls all who come under its influence." As the figure's words faded, Lyra looked back at the battle. The wolf had already destroyed the remaining soldiers, its form dissolving back into the forest as if it had never been there. But the ship was still there, looming above, its cold, dark presence a constant reminder that the fight was far from over. Lyra knew what she had to do. She couldn't fight the darkness head-on, but she could learn from it, understand its connection to the earth, and find a way to use that knowledge against it. It wasn't over. Not yet. With renewed determination, she turned and ran toward the heart of the forest, where she hoped to find more answers. The battle had only begun, and Lyra knew one thing for certain. She was not alone in this fight, and Earth had not yet given up.